Alright, in this video we'll be working and practicing with fractions. So for our first worksheet, I will introduce you to how to identify a fraction. And starting with activity number 1, the instruction says draw a rectangle, then divide the rectangle into 2 parts. Lastly, shade in one part of the rectangular boxes. And it asks, what is the fraction for the shaded part of the rectangle? Whoa, there was a lot going on. So first, we will start from the beginning and then move on one step at a time, right? Because there's a lot of steps and we don't even know where to start. So obviously, if it says draw a rectangle, then we will draw one. So I already drew one here. I will take away this bar. Okay, forget what happened. So here's a rectangle, and then moving on, it says then divide the rectangle into 2 parts. 2 parts. All right. And bring back the bar, and then put it here so that the rectangles, the 2 parts, right, are equal to each other. It shouldn't be like this, where one side of the rectangle is larger in size than the other one, because when it says 2 parts and when we're talking about fractions, the parts should be equal. And of course, it is still that original rectangle, but now it's just divided into 2 parts, but it's not separated. It's just inside that rectangle. So the total of parts in this rectangle, which is 2, it is what we call the denominator. So now we have our denominator. Don't look. Alright, let's input it here. So it's not 3, it's 2. Let me change it. Alright, so we have 2 as a denominator, because that's how many parts there are in this rectangle, right? 2 parts of this rectangle. Okay, so that's our denominator. One thing I just want to say, always identify the denominator, and it's usually said in the instructions, because when they mention divide or split the blank shape into blank parts, you will know what to put as your denominator. For example, here it says 2 parts, so then here we go. There's our denominator. Alright, so then therefore 2 will be the denominator, and moving on to the next step. Lastly, shade in one part of the rectangular boxes. Okay, let's get our box. So you see over here, it says this box, the black box, is equal to the shaded parts. And the instructions wants us to shade in the rectangle, so then I'll use the shape to cover half of the rectangle, symbolize that it's shaded. I don't want this part to be white, since like the background's white and it might just mess with your brain, right? So here we have our shaded part, and so now one part is shaded in. There are still 2 parts in total, right? But the question asks for us to write a fraction for the shaded part of the rectangle. So as you can see here, there's only one box that is shaded, so we would have to put 1, right, as the numerator. Now, here is our fraction bar, and it did its job to make this entire number a fraction. Alright? Okay. Moving on to question 2, or activity number 2. So it says draw a rectangle. Alright, I drew a rectangle. I'm gonna remove these lines. Okay, draw a rectangle, then divide the rectangle into 3 parts. Okay, so 3 rectangles inside of this big rectangle. Okay? and we have to make them equal. Should be equal. If not, it's alright. At least it looks equal. Okay, so then 3 would be our denominator, right? It says divide the blank shape, and the shape is rectangle, into blank parts. 3 parts. So that helps us to determine our denominator, which is 3. And you can count it yourself as well. 1, 2, 3. 3 parts of this rectangle. Okay. So then it says shade in 2 parts of the rectangular boxes. Okay, let's get this. Adjust the size. Get this one. Hopefully the white lines show up. I think that's good. Alright, done. Okay, look carefully at the question. It asks for a fraction for the non-shaded parts this time. So, non-shaded, right? Knowing that there's 2 shaded, alright, we're going to put 2 as the numerator. It's 2 over 3 for the shaded parts of the rectangle, but what the question is asking for is the non-shaded parts. And the non-shaded parts is just this one part, right? There's only one rectangular box that is not shaded. But I want to try a different method with you guys, and so we'll try eliminating. So then, if we know that there are 3 boxes in total, we're going to put 3 here. 3, right? 1, 2, 3. And we're not talking about the shaded or non-shaded. Ignore that. So 3 in total. And then 2 that are shaded. So out of all of these boxes, we subtract the shaded parts, which are 2, to get 1. 1 signifies and symbolizes as this one box that is not shaded. Alright, so we'll put 1 here, and then this is the fraction for the non-shaded part of the rectangle. And you see over here, pro tip, the numerator for both the shaded and non-shaded fractions should add up to equal the denominator. So the shaded fraction is, like we said, 2 over 3. And then the non-shaded fraction is over here, 1 over 3. So 2 over 3 plus 1 over 3. 1 plus 2 gives us, right, 3. So then that number equals the denominator, 3 over 3. Perfect. So that means our answer is correct. Okay. And if you remember, 3 over 3 is also equal to a whole, but it is also equal to 1. Alright, moving on to activity number 3. Remember, the whole can be represented by shapes other than a circle or a rectangle, right? And so now it asks us to make our own fraction using a shape apart from a circle and rectangle. Additionally, try dividing the previous shapes in a different way. Alright, so what do we have here? Let's take away this. So we have an octagon, right? It has 8 sides. Perfect. That means it has also 8 parts to it. So then for this activity, we'll be working with an octagon, and I've already divided parts, and of course you can use any shape. I'm just gonna work with an octagon. So I've already divided parts. They're all equal. It's like in a pizza shape, right? Triangles. So that's what I did here. It says try dividing the previous shapes in a different way. So before we divided it into smaller rectangles, right? Above this activity here, over here, we divided it into smaller rectangles because we began with a rectangle, and then we start dividing it, but then it still looked like a rectangle. However, for this shape, we couldn't really divide it into like an octagon, a mini octagon, right? Because then it would get complicated, or it just won't equal. Like, we can't know for sure that it will equal or fit in this octagon. So then the easiest way is just to draw this long line and divide it across to get a symmetric shape. So as you can see here, these triangles are all equal. And then now we're just going to fill in the denominator. So I put x here because I didn't want to tell you the answer before we put it down. But knowing that there's 8 parts in this octagon, what are we going to put here? There is a total of 8 parts in this octagon. So we put 8, right? Because we haven't started putting this triangle in, because what is this? This is to represent the shaded parts of this shape. So now we're going to put it in. Alright, we just have one triangle, or one part of this octagon is shaded in, and the rest aren't. So if there's only one, then we just put 1 over 8. 1 over 8 is the fraction for the shaded part of this shape. What if there was 2? Alright, now we have 2 shaded parts. We'll have to add 1 to this fraction. 1 plus 1 gives us 2. So now we have 2 over 8 as our fraction. Alright, perfect. Now, moving on to activity number 4. For this one, I didn't do anything yet. We're gonna work on it together this time. Alright, so knowing that we can use other shapes to, knowing that we can use different shapes to represent a fraction, we can also divide the shape into different forms. So the question says, now it's your turn to make your own fraction, dividing it using a different form. Come up with various visuals using that one shape. Okay, so we basically showed it up here. We can try, let's go back to a rectangle. Rectangle. So this is straight, right? Not diagonal. It is perfectly straight. Perfect. Alright. So this time we're going to, let's divide it into, we're just going to stay with 2 parts. It might get complicated. So we're going to divide this rectangle into 2 parts. So see, we divided it by 2 parts. Alright. Okay, perfect. So these are 2 equal parts. And then now it says come up with various visuals using that one shape. That means we don't have to continuously dividing the shape into like this, where the parts are all in the vertical direction. It's all about creativity, but in the end, the parts of the rectangle has to equal to one another, since accuracy is important in the presence of a fraction. And of course, we can implement it in a different way, as shown here.
our last method for dividing this rectangle could be done horizontally.
Okay, this is not equal, but we'll just stick with it. Like this. These are the examples I'm talking about when I say coming up with various visuals using that one shape. Like, it's still that rectangle we're using. It's still that shape. We didn't change that shape, but within that shape, we used various methods to divide it because the way we divided it, they all look different, right? Moving back to, let's say, this one where it looked like there's 4 different frames, right? You see here? Alright, so that's what we did, and for this one we didn't necessarily have to make a fraction, but you can on your end. It's always up to you. And then that's the end to your daily math refresher. Remember to check out the following videos for this playlist. Take care.